Hello and thank you for watching my video. This is another in the profession guide series, and today we're going to be looking at the warrior. Now the warrior is pretty much the standard type of profession that you will get in your MMO or even any particular sort of multiplayer modes or sort of role playing. There is always the warrior, the main guy, the tanky guy, the one that does a lot of damage, and that's the case that we're going to talk about today. The warrior is a very versatile character. He is pretty much bog standard. He can fit into any sort of party competition, party comp, be it world versus world, PvP, PvE, and in fact in the dungeons, particularly the warrior is extremely useful. And let's talk about look at the warrior, how it feels. He is the main character that gets into the thick of the action. He gets in there and he really can do a significant amount of damage. Particularly here, we look at my warrior here. He's got a great sword and he can do a significant amount of damage. He's got a lot of mobility with whirlwind attack and rush, so he can really charge down an opponent, and he is able to get in lots of might. And if we look at my character here, he is one of those characters that's a Zerker warrior, so he is properly full on for doing max amounts of damage, and he's a very useful character for running dungeons. He's really handy to particularly the Citadel Flame, Ascalon Catacombs. He will cleave down enemies extremely quickly. So how does it feel to play a warrior? Well, it's kind of cool. I will admit that back in Guild Wars 1, I didn't find my warrior too exciting until I was going for achievements, and I actually got the majority of my achievements on my warrior. My warrior got the God Walking Amongst Mere Mortals title in Guild Wars 1. And the warrior does have that ability to sort of go around the world, and he can go wherever he wants, and he doesn't have to be fearful of too much. He has all this sort of ability to get himself out of danger. So let's have a look at the warrior, and he does have an extremely huge amount of weapons. So if we go to weapon skills, he can have sword, main hand and offhand. Sword 2 is extremely good for mobility, particularly in PvP. Perhaps for Spirit Rush, you'll be looking at Spirit Watch. You'll be looking at the sword 2 skill being very handy to escape, and very high mobility for there. I actually run the hammer, sort of the Hambo builds. There are sort of a few variations. Hammer can be very interesting for a warrior. A lot of knockdowns and sort of punishing attacks. And the longbow, one of the few ranged weapons that the warrior has, ability to do a lot of actually condition damage as well. So it's one of the few weapons that actually does allow condition damage, as does the sword. If you've got, look at the sword here, we have Torment and Bleeding. These the sword combo, the dual swords, are actually very good at condition damage for a warrior. And when I say good at condition damage, I just mean it's very good from a warrior's perspective. If you do want to run a condi spec, I have to say there aren't many that would do this, because I don't think the warrior is that well set up for condition damage. But generally, if you're looking at warriors for condition damage, you will see a fair amount running dual swords. It's not the only way you can run condition damage. The longbow is very good at condition damage. And there are a few other skills as well, but we're going to come on to those later. Dual axe. I enjoy running dual axe. I find dual axe really cool to play. I just wish it would do a little bit more damage. I feel that I think that the dual axes are a bit underpowered. It just generally doesn't feel as though you're really hitting home. I mean, these should be dual axes. You should be really smashing into your enemy, and it just feels like you're really like tapping them away, slapping them down. We do have the great sword. Obviously, this is the main damage dealer. There isn't really many more weapons that are that powerful in the game. Maces, again, another of these dual weapons like the axes and the swords. You can have dual maces, and again, I just feel that they should be more powerful. This skill 5 should be a really powerful skill, and it just generally isn't. I feel very disappointed when wielding maces. I don't feel powerful. I just feel pretty like I'm wasting. Why am I wielding maces when I could be wielding a greatsword? Again, we have another warrior skill. This is the rifle, sorry, another ranged warrior skill, and this is actually a fairly handy ranged weapon. You can do significant damage with this actual ranged weapon. You'll see a lot of different builds will actually sort of swap out to rifle and can do significant damage from range with the rifle. The Warhorn, again, if you'll see in PvP a lot of shout bow type builds. For those of you who are not sure what the shout bow is, I'd advise going to the places like Meta Build that can explain it a lot better than I could. I don't actually have that build yet on my channel. I might develop that a bit later. But it's very good for cleansing conditions and that high mobility. And then we even have Shield. Shield is a defensive skill. You know, we have block attacks and the ability to bash your foe with your shield and stun them. So again, it's a useful sort of defensive weapon. And I generally don't tend to run Shield unless I want to avoid damage. Like there's a lot of enemies dealing me damage. It's very handy to use that. And then also you can also pop a couple of other skills, things like endure pain and you know, sort of the berserker stance that don't allow condition damage or just basic damage to apply to you. So there are a number of different skills that the warrior can take. Well, the most weapons that any profession has in the game, because of all these offhand and main hand weapons. So there is a lot of variety a warrior can go for, but generally everybody takes a greatsword because it just does that much damage compared to anything else. Hammer does come quite, you know, is a good sort of alternate, and the longbow if you're, you know, want to attack from range. I generally do have a sort of a main hand melee weapon, and I like to take a ranged weapon just because you can get CC'd and then you're screwed if you're out of melee range. So this is generally the weapon skills for the warrior. Okay, so let's move on. We're now into the trait line. You can see here with the Zerker build, you know, we have Reckless Dodge, so I damage foes at the end of a dodge roll. This is in the power build. Percentage of power is given as a bonus to vitality. You know, is there anything else that I would really go for? If you're dual wielding, that would be handy, but generally no, there isn't really much else. You know, so if you went for that, you lose a little bit of vitality. It's not too much really. Yeah, I just like having that extra bit of health. Burst skills restore endurance on hit, so these burst skills, they do restore a little bit of endurance. And we have in the master line, if you're going with axes, then you might want to go for that. Apply confusion when you interrupt a foe. I actually have that on a different build for my hammer. If you have a hammer and you really you can interrupt foes, it's very, very good because you add 4 stacks of confusion for 10 seconds, and it's a significant damage that you can do on an enemy with distracting strikes. Physical utility skills deal more damage, reduces recharge on physical utility skills. These would be things like Bull's Charge and Throw Bolus and Kick. I generally don't see too many of these in Guild Wars 2. The only time you'd ever see them is perhaps on a map like Skyhammer in PvP. I've seen Bull's Charge and, you know, Kick because that gives the knockback, and that's obviously the knockdown and the knockback, very, very handy indeed. But yeah, generally you'd never really take it. Greatsword damage increased by 10%. That's why I take that. So pretty standard. Gain a damage bonus when endurance is not full. So obviously when you've used endurance, you gain a damage bonus of 3%. Not too great, so that's why you know, it's pretty useless. Because you then have you've got a few different abilities here. Burst precision. Burst skills have an increased chance to critically hit, which means basically these burst skills will critical. The cooldown, it doesn't have a cooldown, so as long as you keep hitting, you know, if you go on here, your arcing slice, you really will do a critical hit chance. Berserker's Might, gain adrenaline while in combat. It's quite handy. I go for Berserker's Power because increased damage based on how much adrenaline you've built. If you've got maximum adrenaline, you're getting an extra 15% damage, and that's why it's extremely powerful. And it negates this one here, Stick and Move, so you gain a damage bonus when endurance is not full. Sorry, I made a complete mistake there. I do apologise. Endurance being the I don't know what I read that as burst as the adrenaline for some reason. So if you're moving around a lot, then you get an extra 3% increased damage. Oh dear, that's a bit of a schoolboy error, but I'll leave that in just because, you know, I'm showing you guys I do make mistakes. So yeah, so if you get that extra 3% if you dodge around, so there we go, we get an extra 3% now. That's it. So increased damage based on how much adrenaline you have. So you get 5%, you get 10%, and then 15% extra damage for how much adrenaline you build. We then go into the arms trait line, which is precision and condition damage. So you chance to cause bleeding on critical hits. You know, it's pretty standard. I do occasionally run deep strike if I've got more. I actually run that occasionally for PvP for my Hambo build because I do take a lot of signets because you get extra precision. You have a chance to gain swiftness on critical hits. I also is a very good skill because if you're critical, you can get a lot of swiftness built up. Bleeds apply longer, so that's quite handy for a condition damage warrior. Rifle shots pierce, so again, if you're taking the rifle, that's handy. I go with rending strikes, a chance to cause vulnerability on critical hits. Especially if you're using 100 blades, you can really do a lot of vulnerability and really cause a huge amount of damage. Gain fury and vigor when you take damage, but again, if you take more than 2,000 damage or 2,165, you gain fury and vigor. You know, it's doable, but generally I don't take that. You gain burst skills having an increased critical chance. So burst skills restore endurance, and they also increase critical chance. So that's these skills here. We get forceful greatsword, so gain might on a critical hit with a greatsword, and reduces recharge on greatsword skills. So it's pretty handy indeed. There really isn't. If you're running swords, critical hit chance by 10% increased. That might be handy. And increasing critical hit chance against stun foes. If you're taking a hammer, that would be pretty handy indeed as well. Increases damage to bleeding foes. You've got a dual wield ability, so obviously if you are wielding 2 maces, 2 swords, or 2 axes, that can be a very good one to take because you increase your attack speed by 10%. Critical hits grant bonus adrenaline. I did you know, I have tempted to take this instead of Last Chance, but I actually enjoy Last Chance because it means that I can get that 4 seconds of quickness, and I am really unloading my skills in a, you know, really end the opponent really quickly. So let's look at the defense trait line. We gain extra armor when my health is above 90%. I give that extra toughness. So if you are trying to go for a tanky build, this is quite a good line to go for. Gain toughness when you're using a shield. So again, if you've got a shield and you're above 90%, you will get an extra 190 toughness. Really impressive indeed. You've got like sort of this cancels out chilled, cripple, and immobilize. They are reduced in duration. Increases your stance duration, so I take this for PvP because I will then go for things like you know, what's it called, berserker stance, so conditions can't be applied to me. That increases the length of that you can be in that stance for. Very handy indeed. And you can rally with vigorous return, not really necessary for me. Reflect missiles whenever you're blocking, very few people would ever take that. Increases damage to weaken foes. That's quite handy because obviously it's an increase in damage. If you weaken someone with a hammer, you can then also increase the damage a lot. Well, by 5% anyway, so not too much. Mace damage is increased when a foe's weakened. So if you're taking maces, obviously they're the one to go for. You've got Last Stand. Activates balance stance, so that's quite handy to get that extra bit of stability when you are dazed, knocked back, pulled, or stunned. So if you're, for example, trying to stomp in PvP a necro and they try to fear you, you will gain stability. A very handy one indeed. Cleansing Ire, so you remove a condition. This is what I actually have in PvP for when obviously condition removal isn't so prevalent on the warrior. And if you use your Cleansing Ire, you can use a adrenaline skill, so a burst skill, sorry, and this will actually cleanse a condition. So for example, if you have maximum adrenaline and you've got 3 conditions on you, you press F1, you'll lose 3 conditions. Very handy indeed. Merciless Hammer, obviously for hammer builds, hambos, that's quite a handy one to take. Defy Pain's a good one to take. You remove, you don't take any pain when you're below the threshold, so you don't take any damage. So again, for those tanky type of warriors, these are quite handy to take. Gain retaliation when hit, or gain toughness when you break out of a stun. Optional, but you Yeah, I don't really see. I mean, that one there, you gain up to 1,000 toughness based on your level. That could be really, really handy indeed. But it's a very difficult build to run a sort of toughness healing, this trait line here. If you were going to go and use that, Defy Pain is quite a good one because it's a 4 seconds of no pain. It really does give you that extra bit of survivability. Okay, so we move into the tactics trait line. And here we actually have, obviously this is increasing boon duration and vitality. So immobilize a target when you cripple them. You only get a 1 second immobilize, but it can be good if you're chasing down an opponent and you want to cripple them. Things like Blade Trail, very, very handy. Reduces recharge on shouts, so things like the shout bow is quite handy for this. You know, if you look at the shouts, you have obviously things like For Great Justice, and you know, On My Mark, cure a condition on yourself and nearby allies, and also break stuns. So they're all pretty handy because you know, it's very good for cleansing conditions on this. Desperate Power, so you do additional damage while below the health threshold. So when you're below 25%, you deal an extra 20% damage. So that's really when you're down to your last bit of health. So I'd rather not be in that position. Increases longbow range, so again, if you're going around in PvE, going around in the world, it's quite handy to attack enemies with the increased longbow range. Banners apply their bonuses to a larger area, so that's quite good for things like, you see here I'm running Banner of Discipline. That's quite good to obviously reduce the recharge rate and increase the radius of which it affects people. Increases damage for every boon on you, so if you're in a party and you're getting a lot of boons, particularly from Guardians or Elementalists, this can be extremely useful. You can get like a 10% boost from all these boons that are affecting you. Shrug It Off, so you Shake It Off automatically when you have a number of conditions on you. So when you have a condition on you, you'll get a 29, you'll cleanse it immediately and get a 29-second cooldown before it affects you again. And not only that, it also affects nearby allies and breaks stuns, so that is a useful trait to take with you. Empower Allies, very, very useful for PvE. If you're going around dungeons, you can increase the power of nearby allies, so very good if you want to empower your Elementalists. This in conjunction particularly maybe with a ranger using the spotter trait line would really allow your party to do a significant extra amount of damage. Reduces recharge on Warhorse skills. Warhorn, obviously that would be to do with the cleansing. PvP, very useful indeed. Longbow damage is increased against burning foes, so that is a useful one to take. Obviously, again, if you're focusing on the longbow as a sort of weapon to use for your warrior. But this is to do with regeneration for banners. Shouts heal, so obviously that's a useful one to take along. Phalanx strength. You'll notice there is a lot of PS warriors that are becoming into PvE a lot now. You'll see them a lot in the fractals, particularly. When you grant yourself might, you grant it to nearby allies as well. And Phalanx Strength, you'll see a lot of this type of build run in Guild Wars 2 at the moment. Again, if you want to look at what builds to run that use Phalanx Strength, I would advise going to look at the meta battle sort of the websites, because they can really give you much better advice than I ever could. Then we go to Discipline, Ferocity, and Burst Recharge. So obviously this affects the critical hit and critical hit damage. So let's have a look what we've got. We've got Gain Adrenaline on Weapon Swap. So obviously you keep weapon swapping, you gain Adrenaline. And Signets recharge much faster. So things like I've got here, you know, if you want to, these actually have a quick cooldown, 16 seconds or 20 seconds. Or even here we've got 48 seconds. So I take this in PvE and PvP. You gain Might when you block an attack, so if you really gain tanky, you can get that bit of extra damage and condition damage. Gain Adrenaline on a kill, I don't really use that. I don't think it's necessary. You build it up quickly enough. You move faster while wielding melee weapons, so that's handy indeed. You can move 25% faster. If you're wielding a great sword or swords, maces, whatever it is, you will really move a lot faster. Gain Adrenaline when using a shout. Again, I don't think any adrenaline boost is really that necessary. Gain Vigor when using a stance, so obviously that allows you to dodge around a lot more. We have Sweet Revenge. Vengeance has an increased chance to rally, so that's quite handy, particularly for PvE or PvP. You can really rally quite quick, well, if you go down to go into Vengeance mode, you'll get 100% chance to rally. deal bonus damage, but a increased chance to rally. Sorry, deal bonus damage per boon on your target. So against things like guardians or elementalists, this can be very, very useful indeed. Axes, this is obviously to do with the axe skill, gets you a bit of extra adrenaline and reduces the recharge. Movement skills, break, immobilize. You've got the burst skills, deal more damage and restore adrenaline on you. So it's things like arcing slice. You'll get increased damage and you'll gain adrenaline back again. Gain bonus critical hit chance for each stage of adrenaline you have. So if you've got maximum adrenaline, you get an extra 15% critical hit chance. A very, very good skill to take with you. And remove conditions when you swap weapons. So again, if you're using you want to go for the cleanse swap, you know, sort of condition cleansing, weapon swapping allows you to remove conditions. We also have weapon swapping reduces recharges faster, and gain might on a weapon swap. Grant might to nearby allies when you revive someone, and increases revive speed. So very good for PvP because you can really revive them that little bit faster. So let's talk about the traits. Obviously, for the armor, you know, I'm going for the Berserker build. There isn't really much else that you really do want to go for, because the warriors do tend to be the heavy damage dealers in Guild Wars 2 at the moment, and so it's really worthwhile taking a lot of these power, precision, ferocity type armor sets or weapons, and these are the big damage dealers in Guild Wars 2. You know, the Elementalist probably comes close for the amount of damage it can do. The Thief can do more damage over a short period of time, but you know, after a while, it will be the Warrior that does more damage than the Thief. But yeah, generally the Warrior and the Elementalist, they're the two biggest damage dealers for pure damage in the game. And the Warrior, as a how to play it, generally it's a nice one to play. You know, you can go around the world, not have too many issues with it. You can really do much damage. You know, you've got all, like I said, whirling axe. If you want to use skills like, you've got skill 5 that would charge you there. If you want high mobility, you can use Signet here, and that will give you swiftness, and that gives you a long duration of swiftness as well. So you can move around the map very, very quickly. We get banners, which is obviously that's the unique thing for warriors. They get banners and adrenaline, and adrenaline obviously it builds up the more time you're in combat, and then you get a special skill. I think the skill needs to be improved. I don't think they do enough damage, these F1 skills. But again, you've got some signets that you can take with you that will increase your sort of passive stats, and banners that also increase things like precision, power, and condition damage, healing power. So, and they're pretty handy, particularly in dungeons as well. Obviously, with your elite, you can go for war battle standard that can resurrect quickly your allies that are down state. And you have rampage, which has actually got a little bit of a boost recently, and is quite handy to take around because you can stomp around and really push and CC your opponent around the map. This has just generally been the Warriors, the profession guide to Warrior. It's a good build. It's a good profession to start off with. It's one that it was the second character I made in Guild Wars 2. Obviously, you can see here it's my Norn. The majority of Warriors will tend to be Norns, or the majority of Norns will tend to be Warriors. But again, it is a fun profession to play. There isn't many downsides to playing a Warrior. It can get a bit dull, but it's a Warrior. This is the standard class that you'll get in most MMOs. A guy that can do a lot of damage, that can tank, and this character here fills those boxes. And generally, I enjoy playing my Warrior. The fact that I've got a lot of critical damage on this guy really does allow me to do a lot of different things. In the dungeons, I'm very, very useful, and yeah. There's not really much else to say apart from the fact that the Warrior, I wish had a little bit more boosts to some of its sort of like maces and axes and other sword skills, because I do think that the Great Sword is extremely powerful, and there isn't much point in running anything else. But yeah, in PvP, there's a number of different builds you can run, and it generally is a very good profession to play. So I'm hoping that this has been useful. If you haven't played Warrior, or you're new to Warrior, or even if you're experienced at Warrior, I'm hoping that this actual video guide has been quite useful for yourself. And if you have any suggestions, any feedback, please leave them in the comment section, and I'll see you on the next video. Thank you for watching.